So this activity will give you a chance to use a specific strategy to develop some understanding standards from scratch. Just before we do that, let's think a little bit about the difference between knowledge and understanding. So I'm going to give you a moment to take a look at this picture, think about this quote, and just react to it. Now I'm going to ask you a question and give you, once again, about 30 seconds thinking time. How do people get from one to the other? How do they move from isolated pieces of knowledge towards understanding? Or, in fact, from isolated skills towards understanding how those skills fit together? So hopefully now you have some of your own thoughts in your head about the difference in knowledge and understanding and what we actually mean by understanding. Let's take a look at some work by Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe. They believe that if a student truly understands something, some of the things they can do with that is to explain it, interpret it, or apply it. So what might that look like? In economics, a student might be able to state as a piece of knowledge that supply and demand affect price. If they truly understand it, however, they might be able to explain one of Wiggins and McTighe's facets of understanding using different examples from different contexts, exactly how the price of something has increased or decreased, using a variety of supply and demand factors. You'll note that to truly understand, they'd need to be able to explain it in more than one context, so that they can really see what's transferable and what's not, and what the important underlying ideas are. Second example here, a student may know that Trump became president despite having less votes than Clinton in 2016. If we want the student to truly show us that they've understood the American electoral system, that statement will not be anywhere near enough. Even if they could explain the rules of the electoral system, it wouldn't be enough. They'd need to explain to us something like exactly what processes led to this. And if we really wanted them to, that would show one level of understanding. If we wanted them to show an even deeper level of understanding, we might ask them to propose some relevant changes to the system. So that you can see that one of the important things about understanding is that in order for us to see it, we have to apply it in a context, or explain it within a context, interpret it within a context. This excellent book from the National Research Council of the United States summarizes some of the things we've learned in the last few decades about learning. One of the key areas of research they summarize the difference between experts and novices in any given field. And one of those differences is that the knowledge of experts is organized around key concepts in that field. So what does that look like? Lynn Erickson tells us that traditionally in school, we have organized knowledge around topics. We've had some facts, organized them under a topic, but the problem with that organizational pattern is that there's nowhere to go beyond the topics. There's often not a natural connector beyond those topics. So for example, to take a really simple example, we might learn some facts about dinosaurs, connect them under dinosaurs, some facts about transport, but there's no way we can connect those two things realistically to organize our knowledge in our heads. What if we were to shift the idea of dinosaurs down to the fact level and take not just dinosaurs, but the entire extinction of the Cretaceous Tertiary? Perhaps take another example of an extinction, and then some more recent examples of species that have gone extinct, and try to extract from that. We're going to call that now the illustrative content, because the idea is that this content only ever illustrates ideas that are bigger than the content itself. So from that, we might pull the idea of extinction. We might pull the idea of resilience as we're learning about these things. There may be some other concepts that we'll pull in, things like change, and we'll identify the key concepts that are going to help us understand the what's transferable across all these situations. And we might end up with the idea, or a student might end up with the idea, that less resilient species are more likely to become extinct, especially during periods of rapid change. They may come up with a more complex idea than that too, but generally what we're doing is connecting those important concepts into an idea that becomes transferable across multiple different contexts. A little bit of research that underpins this. Apparently, we actually have two fairly separate memory systems in our brains. We have a memory for surface details. Those of you who are old enough, like me, to be able to have remembered your friends' phone numbers, you can do it. And you can do it quite efficiently. But apparently those are stored separately from memories for underlying patterns, or what these particular researchers call gist. Now, the important thing to know about that is that when we reason in a problem-solving context, it's our memory for underlying patterns and meaning that we reason with, not our memory for isolated facts. So if we go back to this, our organization of knowledge here, our structure of knowledge, the verbatim memory is about the illustrative content. It's about the individual facts. It's still important to remember many of those individual facts. We can't look them up every single time we need them. But it's really this gist memory, which is about the concepts and their connections, that we're going to be using to solve problems. So if we connect those concepts into statements of understanding, here's a couple of examples of what that might look like in different disciplines. I'll just give you a few moments to read these for yourself. So we've learned that these understanding statements in the curriculum that we're going to call understanding standards are basically standards which connect to different concepts, standards of statements of conceptual connection. So there's a thinking routine from the Harvard Visible Thinking Project called Generate, Sort, Connect, and Elaborate that might help us construct these. Now, we've tweaked this slightly so that it fits for this purpose, but here's basically how it works. First, you generate a list of concepts or ideas related to the central one. Second, you sort the concepts into related groups. Thirdly, you connect by drawing some connecting lines on the relationships between those concepts. And then you explain that connection in a short sentence or a few words. And then finally, you elaborate those connections and expand on them, extend them, add to your initial ideas to create an understanding statement. What does that look like in practice? Let's say we've got the concept of group membership in the center. We might brainstorm ideas like, well, groups have different interests. They have different values. Groups often need to make decisions together. Groups often have power structures. Groups often evolve a culture over time and develop a very specific identity. Groups, especially larger groups, tend to put leadership structures in place, and groups tend to have sets of rights and responsibilities. They also can come into conflict within the group and with other groups. Now, this is not a definitive set of concepts, but it's a pretty useful one that we could start to think about some understanding around the idea of group membership. So next, we're going to sort those into related groups. If we take the idea of interests, well, it's often the interests, our group interests, that might cause conflict with other groups. So we're going to lump them together. It's also sometimes the idea of identity within and across groups that causes conflict. So we have a little group of concepts in the top left-hand corner there. Leadership and decision-making, I think we can see a connection there. And we can certainly see a connection with both of those to power. We have a second little group in the top right there. And rights and responsibilities, I can see how they might be connected to the values that we have and to our culture as a group. So we have a third little group there. So next we're going to connect, and I've chosen to connect just the bottom right-hand group of concepts for this exercise, and then as a practice exercise you can take one of the top ones and try it out for yourself. So group membership actually, I believe, entails rights and responsibilities. If you're a member of a group, then you necessarily need to abide by the responsibilities of the group in order to have the rights of that group. How might they be connected to values? Well, perhaps the rights and responsibilities differ depending on a group's important values. We will give each other rights around the things that we value, for example. And then perhaps our values actually, to some extent, are specific to our culture, that will be different from culture to culture, which means then that the things that we decide we should have as rights as individuals may be different as well. So finally, now that we've got this set of connections, we're going to elaborate that using the sentence starter, learners understand that, and we might come up with something like this. Learners understand that group membership entails the acceptance of reciprocal rights, roles, and responsibilities which are derived from a cultural value system. You'll notice that we have actually elaborated on this. We've added the idea of reciprocity. We've built everything together. You should also notice that the verb we've chosen here, are derived from, actually suggests that it's the cultural value system which is driving this, which is causing the rights, roles, and responsibilities. And you'll often find when you write these understanding goals that the most powerful ones have some element of cause and effect in them. One thing is causing another thing. So now it's your turn to practice. If you take one of the other clusters, either the green or the yellow, the left-hand one, or the one around conflict, identity, interests, or the decision-making, leadership, power, you can create your own understanding goal. You can play around with both of them if you like, if you'd like some more practice.